They dragged her out of the pack to die, until the Alpha King found his mate smiling. Somewhere deep in the woods, a howl broke the silence, long and lonely, carrying both warning and sorrow. Lyra ran, her bare feet slipping over roots and rocks, her breaths ragged but determined. Her pack had been torn apart, the elders slain, the young scattered. She had been dragged from her home by strangers from the rival faction, their faces masked, their intentions clear. She was to die before dawn. But Lyra did not cry. She did not scream. She smiled. The smile was small, almost fragile, but it shone through the terror surrounding her. It was not a smile of joy. It was a smile of defiance. Even in the face of certain death, even as her heart pounded against her chest, she refused to let fear consume her. She ran, knowing that if she faltered, she would never live to see the sun rise again. The forest seemed endless, each tree taller and older than any she had ever seen. Moss covered their trunks, soft and cold under her fingertips when she stumbled. Shadows danced like spirits in the corners of her eyes, and the wind carried whispers that made her shiver. But still, she ran. Suddenly, the ground beneath her gave way, and she tumbled into a hollow, hitting the damp earth hard. Pain shot through her leg, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself to rise. She was not weak. She could not be weak. Not now. Then she heard it. A sound that stopped her in her tracks and froze her blood. The low, commanding growl of an alpha. Not any alpha, this was different, powerful, ancient, terrifying. Lyra crouched behind a boulder, peering through the shadows, and there he was, Kale, the Alpha King. His presence was like fire and ice at once, an impossible force that made the wind still and the trees tremble. His dark hair fell over his eyes, which glowed faintly in the moonlight. He moved with a grace that was both beautiful and deadly, a predator who commanded respect from all who saw him. He stopped. His gaze swept the forest with an intensity that made Lyra's heart skip a beat. And then slowly he looked straight at her. Time seemed to stop. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, yet the smile did not leave her lips. She did not cower. She had faced death before, and she would face it again, even if it came in the form of this Alpha King. Kale tilted his head, studying her. His expression was unreadable, but something flickered behind his eyes. Curiosity, interest, something that made the hairs on Lyra's arms stand on end. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally, his voice low and smooth, carrying authority with every word. "The forest does not forgive weakness." "I'm not weak," Lyra said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm alive, and I will stay alive no matter what." Kale's lips quirked, almost imperceptibly at her defiance. He stepped closer, and with every movement the air seemed to thrum with tension. Lyra could feel the power radiating from him, the kind of power that made the ground beneath her feel small and fragile. "Alive, yes," he said, almost to himself. "But for how long?" Before she could answer, a rustle in the trees drew their attention. Shadows shifted and figures emerged, masked hunters, the ones who had taken her from her pack. They moved with deadly precision, weapons glinting in the moonlight. Kale's eyes darkened. He stepped in front of Lyra, his presence a shield that no ordinary force could pierce. "Leave her," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of storms. "Or face me." The hunters hesitated, but the Alpha King's power was unmistakable. Even in their numbers they faltered. One by one, they retreated into the shadows, disappearing as silently as they had come. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest, but this time it was not only from fear. Relief surged through her, but it was tangled with awe, confusion, and a strange, thrilling fear she did not understand. Kale turned to her then, his eyes searching hers. "You shouldn't be smiling," he said, almost a warning, almost a question. "Not here, not now. Not with death so close." "I smile because I can," she replied softly, "because I'm still breathing, because someone strong enough to stand in front of me exists, someone like you." Kale's expression hardened for a moment, then softened. The contrast was startling, like lightning and shadow. He reached out a hand, but before she could react, the forest itself seemed to groan. The trees bent unnaturally, shadows twisting into shapes that made Lyra's stomach drop. A low growl rose from the darkness, not of any human or wolf she knew. It was ancient, primal, and full of malice. Kale's eyes narrowed. "You are not safe," he said. His hand, still reaching toward her, hesitated. "Not even with me." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine, but she did not step back. Something inside her, a stubborn fire, a defiance she had learned from surviving her pack's destruction, urged her forward. "Then teach me to be safe," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet steady. "I'm not afraid of learning, I'm not afraid of anything." Kale studied her, the tension in his body coiling like a spring. Finally, he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Then follow me," he said. "If you want to live, you will do exactly as I say." Lyra's heart leapt. She knew this was no ordinary man. Kale was an alpha king, feared across lands, whispered about in tales meant to scare children and challenge warriors. And yet here he was, offering her a chance to survive. She nodded, a small, determined smile curling on her lips. They moved through the forest together, Kale leading, Lyra following. Every step was a trial, the earth treacherous, the shadows alive with unseen eyes. And with each passing moment, Lyra felt something shift inside her. Fear was still there, but it was mingled with a strange exhilaration, a pull toward the alpha who walked beside her. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The forest eventually opened into a clearing where the moonlight fell like silver rain. Kale stopped and turned to her. "You survived the first test," he said. His eyes searched hers, piercing and unreadable. "But the world outside this forest, it will not be so forgiving." "I know," Lyra said, her voice steady. "I've survived worse." Kale's lips twitched, almost a smile, but it did not reach his eyes. Instead, he looked away, scanning the horizon. "You are strong," he said finally. "Stronger than most I have seen, perhaps stronger than I expected." Lyra's chest tightened. There was a weight in his words, a meaning that pressed against her ribs. He did not say it outright, but she felt it, a connection forming, fragile yet undeniable, like the first thread of dawn breaking through the night. Then the wind shifted. A whisper moved through the trees, carrying words that chilled her to the bone. She could not understand them, but the intent was clear, danger coming closer, unavoidable. Kale stiffened, placing himself between her and the shadows. "The prophecy," he muttered, low and dangerous. "It may be true." Lyra looked up at him, her small smile never faltering. "Then let it come," she said. "I am ready." For a moment, Kale's expression softened, and for the first time, Lyra saw a flicker of something human beneath the fearsome Alpha King. A flicker of hope, of recognition, of something else she could not name. And then the darkness around them stirred. The shadows moved faster, darker shapes forming from the night. Lyra's heart raced, and Kale's growl cut through the silence, deep and commanding. "You will not die tonight," Kale said, his voice carrying over the forest like thunder. "Not while I breathe." Lyra's smile widened, faint but unwavering. She had been dragged out to die, but now she stood at the edge of something greater, something terrifying and beautiful. The wind howled, carrying a warning she could not ignore, and Kale's eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight as he prepared to face whatever came next. For Lyra, the night was far from over. The forest, the hunters, the darkness, all of it waited for her, waited for them. But she would not back down. She would not falter. And in that moment she understood something she had never known before. Sometimes, survival was not about strength alone. It was about the spark of courage that refused to die. Even in the shadow of death, she could smile. The wind whispered through the fortress walls like a restless spirit. Rain lashed against the stone battlements, sending silver streams down the dark towers. Inside, Kale's fortress was alive with quiet tension. Torches flickered in the hallways, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. Lyra followed Kale through the corridors, her feet silent against the cold stone floor. She had never seen a place like this before, grand, ancient, and intimidating, but not cruel. Every room held the weight of history, the echo of lives lived, battles fought, and power maintained. She could feel the pulse of the fortress, a living thing that respected strength and cunning. Kale walked ahead, tall and unyielding, his dark cloak brushing the floor. His presence was like a storm, unpredictable, powerful, and mesmerizing. He did not speak often, but when he did, every word carried weight. Lyra kept her eyes on him, feeling an unfamiliar mixture of fear, curiosity, and something deeper, something she could not name. "You will stay here," Kale finally said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "You are not safe outside these walls, not yet." Lyra's chest tightened. "I am not a child," she said, her voice firm but calm. "I can survive outside these walls. I have survived worse." Kale stopped and turned, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a faint flicker of something in his gaze, acknowledgement, maybe even respect. "Strength alone does not save you in a world that thrives on shadows," he said. "You will need more than courage to survive. You will need guidance, and you will need me." Lyra's lips curved into a small, defiant smile. "Then teach me," she said softly. "I am willing to learn." Kale did not answer immediately. He simply turned and resumed walking, his cloak sweeping behind him. Lyra followed, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of his gaze even when he did not look at her directly. It was as if he could see into her very soul, measuring her, testing her. The days that followed were a blur of training, observation, and quiet discovery. Kale tested her in ways she had never imagined. He taught her to move silently through the fortress, to sense danger before it arrived, and to understand the subtle power that flowed through the forest and the land beyond. Lyra learned quickly, her instincts sharpened by years of survival. But it was not only skill she developed, it was awareness. She began to notice the small things about Kale, the tension in his shoulders, the flicker of shadow across his eyes when he thought no one was watching, the rare moments when his stern expression softened. Kale, in turn, could not ignore her. Her courage, her resilience, and her quiet defiance fascinated him. She was unbroken, even in the face of threats that would have crushed most. He found himself studying her, learning her patterns, and wondering how someone so young could carry such strength and hope. Yet there was a distance between them, invisible but tangible. Kale was a ruler, an alpha king, a man burdened with power and duty. Lyra was a survivor, a stranger pulled from death, standing in a world she did not yet understand. They were drawn to each other, yes, but the pull was tangled with fear, respect, and unspoken rules neither dared to break. One evening, the storm outside the fortress raged with unmatched fury. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the halls with silver light, and thunder shook the walls. Lyra found herself alone in the training room, practicing the maneuvers Kale had taught her. Her movements were precise, each step deliberate, each motion calculated. Yet her mind was elsewhere, filled with thoughts of Kale, the way he moved, the way he commanded attention, the rare, fleeting moments when his gaze softened. "You are improving," Kale's voice said suddenly, low and measured. He had appeared silently in the doorway, as if he had been part of the shadows all along. Lyra startled, dropping into a defensive stance. I am trying," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. Kale stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "Trying is not enough. You must be precise. You must anticipate. You must be ready for anything. The world will not forgive hesitation." "I am ready," Lyra said, her voice firm, though a part of her feared he could see through her words to the uncertainty beneath. Kale's expression softened slightly, a rare flicker of approval. "Good," he said, "but strength alone will not save you. You must also learn to trust. Trust the people who protect you, trust your instincts, and trust me." Lyra's heart thudded. The word hung in the air, heavier than any command or lesson. She nodded, though her mind struggled with its meaning. Trust was a dangerous thing in a world filled with betrayal and shadows. Yet something in Kale's presence felt different, reassuring, commanding, and undeniable. Days turned into nights, and Lyra's understanding of the fortress, the land, and Kale grew. But peace was fragile. Rumors of rebellion and dark forces moving beyond the mountains reached their ears. Kale's advisors whispered of traitors and hidden enemies, and the fortress's shadows seemed to pulse with unease. One night, as the wind howled outside, Kale summoned Lyra to the highest tower. The view from there was breathtaking, even in the storm. Lightning illuminated the jagged cliffs, the dense forest, and the dark rivers that wound like silver threads through the land. "You see this land?" Kale asked, his voice low and commanding. "Every inch of it is mine to protect, but protection is not enough. Power must be wielded with caution, with wisdom, and yet even I cannot control everything." Lyra watched him, sensing the weight behind his words. She had survived loss, betrayal, and death itself, yet she could feel the burden Kale carried. He was strong, yes, but even strength had its limits. "And yet," she said softly, "even the strongest can be brave." Kale's gaze fell on her. For a moment, the storm outside faded into silence, and the only sound was the rapid beating of her heart. "You speak as if you understand bravery," he said, "but you are still young, untested by the world I have seen." "I have been tested," Lyra said. "I have faced death, betrayal, and loss, and I am still here." Kale's eyes darkened, studying her with intensity. "Then perhaps you are stronger than I thought." The next morning, the fortress was thrown into chaos. Scouts reported movement in the forest, an army approaching under the cover of darkness. Kale's eyes narrowed. He turned to Lyra, placing a hand on her shoulder, steady and commanding. "You will stay here," he said firmly. "This is not a fight for the unprepared," but he hesitated, his gaze lingering on her. "You will also observe, learn, watch carefully. Everything that happens tonight will be a lesson you will not forget." Lyra nodded, her heart racing. She wanted to argue, to insist on standing beside him, but she trusted him. She had learned that sometimes survival meant listening, even when the heart demanded otherwise. The night fell, and with it came a storm of steel and shadow. Kale led his warriors into the forest, moving like shadows themselves, striking with precision and power. Lyra watched from the tower, her eyes wide with awe and fear. She saw the strength of Kale, the loyalty of his followers, and the raw danger of the world outside her temporary refuge. Hours passed, and finally the battle ended. The enemy had retreated, leaving the forest silent once more. Lyra descended from the tower, finding Kale waiting in the training hall, his cloak damp, his expression unreadable. "You watched well," he said. "You saw more than just the fight. You saw strategy, timing, and control. Remember this. One day you will need it." Lyra swallowed, nodding. "I saw everything." Kale's gaze lingered on her, and for a moment the weight of the fortress, the storm, and the world outside faded. It was just the two of them, standing in silence, hearts still racing from the tension of the night. "Do you understand?" he asked finally. Lyra nodded. "I do, and I trust you." Kale's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through his commanding presence. "Good," he said, "because soon trust will be the only thing keeping you alive." The storm outside eased, but inside the fortress, tension remained. Shadows moved where no light reached, and whispers of danger lingered in every corner. Lyra knew that the world she had stepped into was far more dangerous than anything she had imagined. And yet, for the first time since being dragged from her pack, she felt something else. Hope, connection, the fragile, dangerous spark of trust and belonging. As she prepared to rest, her mind replayed the moments of the night, the battle, Kale's words, the storm, and the strange pull between them. She knew that her journey had only just begun. There would be more challenges, more tests, more darkness. But she also knew one truth. She would not face them alone. And somewhere in the shadows, Kale watched over her, a silent guardian, a storm tempered by the presence of the one who smiled even in the face of death. The night was far from over, and the forest beyond the walls held secrets yet to be revealed. But for Lyra, for the first time, the weight of fear was tempered by the warmth of trust, and the dangerous, thrilling pull of a connection that neither time nor darkness could easily break. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged and unyielding. Snow whipped through the air in sharp, cold sheets, stinging Lyra's skin as she followed Kale. The journey had been long, treacherous, and silent, except for the occasional growl of distant wolves or the whisper of wind through icy trees. Each step reminded her that survival was never guaranteed, and yet she pressed forward. Kale walked beside her, his figure a constant shadow of strength and calm. He did not speak much, but his presence was enough to guide her through the treacherous paths. Every glance he cast her way carried an unspoken message. Be ready, be alert, trust in yourself, but trust in me as well. Lyra's body ached from the climb and her fingers were numb, yet she kept smiling. Not for Kale, not for herself, but because she refused to let the darkness see her fear. Every step she took was a small act of defiance, a reminder that she was still alive. You have grown stronger, Kale said finally, his voice breaking the silence. His dark eyes scanned the jagged peaks, then returned to her. Faster, sharper, more aware, you are learning. I have to, Lyra replied. If I do not, I will not survive this journey or whatever waits at the top. Kale's gaze softened, though only for a moment. Good. Strength is only part of what you need. Courage, patience, and heart are just as important. You must hold all three or the mountains will claim you. Lyra nodded, her breath coming in short bursts. I understand. The higher they climbed, the colder it became, and the forest below faded into a sea of white. Yet the danger was not only from the storm. Shadows of creatures long thought extinct began to stir among the rocks, wolves larger than any Lyra had seen, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Ghostly shapes slipped between the cliffs, testing her courage with every step. Kale's hand never left hers, guiding her across the ice and snow. She noticed how careful he was, how protective. And yet there was no weakness in him, only control, power, and a deep understanding of the land and its dangers. You fear them, Kale said quietly, his gaze following hers as a shadow passed between two cliffs. Do not. Fear will make you slow, hesitant, and weak. Face them and they will test you. Pass their test and you will learn more than any teacher could show you. Lyra swallowed, gripping his hand tighter. I am ready, she said, though her stomach quivered. Kale's eyes lingered on her face, and for a moment she felt the unspoken bond between them strengthen. It was no longer just survival. It was connection, trust, and a spark of something neither of them fully understood yet. As night fell, they made camp in a small cave nestled in the cliffside. The wind howled outside, but inside the warmth of the fire kept the darkness at bay. Lyra tended to her wounds and the aches in her body, while Kale checked their surroundings with a predator's instinct. You do not speak much in the night, Lyra observed, breaking the silence. Kale's gaze did not leave the fire. The night holds secrets. You must listen, not speak. The mountains reveal themselves only to those who are patient. Lyra nodded. I can do that, but I also want to know what haunts you. You are strong, fearless, and yet there is something beneath it all, isn't there? Kale's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes flickered, betraying the faintest shadow of emotion. The past is heavy, he said finally, and those who lead must carry more than just their own fears. You will understand this one day. For now, focus on surviving the mountains. Lyra smiled softly, though it was tinged with sadness. I will, but I will also remember your words. The following morning, the journey grew more dangerous. Ice sheets broke underfoot and winds howled like angry spirits. Every step became a test of endurance and trust. Lyra relied on Kale to guide her, but she also began to trust herself more. Her instincts sharpened, her senses stretched to the edges of the impossible, and she discovered a quiet power within herself, a resilience that the mountains themselves could not break. It was during this part of the journey that the first real attack came. Shadows moved faster than the eye could follow. Wolves larger than she had ever seen lunged from the rocks, their eyes glowing with unnatural light. Lyra froze for a split second, but Kale's grip on her arm yanked her to safety. "Move," he shouted, his voice slicing through the chaos. Lyra did as he commanded, rolling across the ice and springing to her feet. She swung her staff, a weapon Kale had given her, striking the nearest creature. It howled and vanished into mist as if it had never existed. Kale fought beside her, every movement precise, calculated, lethal. And yet, even in the heat of battle, he protected her, moving between her and danger with careful precision. Lyra felt a strange mixture of fear, exhilaration, and admiration. She realized something she had not admitted before. She was beginning to care for him, not just as a protector, but as something far more important. The fight ended as suddenly as it had begun. The shadows receded, and the mountains fell silent once more. Lyra sank to the ground, exhausted but alive. Kale knelt beside her, brushing snow from her hair. "You did well," he said quietly, his gaze fixed on hers. "Stronger than I expected." Lyra's lips curved into a faint, tired smile. "I am alive, are I?" Kale's eyes darkened, reflecting both pride and something deeper. "Yes, but the journey is far from over. The mountains are only the beginning. You will face greater challenges ahead, tests of heart, courage, and loyalty. And there will be times when you must trust more than your strength. You must trust me." Lyra met his gaze, and in the storm's faint light she saw vulnerability there, a rare, human flicker beneath the Alpha King's fearsome exterior. "I trust you," she whispered. Kale's hand lingered on hers, and for a fleeting moment, time seemed to pause. The mountains, the storm, and the shadows all faded into the background. It was only the two of them, connected by something neither fully understood yet, a bond forged through danger, courage, and shared survival. Days passed, and their journey became increasingly perilous. Lyra's confidence grew alongside her skills. She began to anticipate the dangers Kale had warned her about, to move with his guidance and sometimes even ahead of it. The bond between them deepened, subtle but undeniable, like threads weaving a tapestry neither could yet see in full. Yet the mountains held secrets and shadows that neither had anticipated. One morning, as mist rolled through the cliffs, they discovered a hidden valley. It was quiet, almost peaceful, but the air thrummed with an unseen energy. Lyra sensed it first, a power deep and ancient waiting, watching. "This place," she whispered. "Something is here." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Yes, the valley is old, older than the mountains themselves. It holds power, both dangerous and revealing. We must be careful. One wrong step and it will consume us." Lyra felt a thrill of fear and excitement. "Then we will face it together," she said. Kale studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, a small but meaningful gesture. "Together," he said. The valley's secret revealed itself that night. Shadows moved among the trees, forming shapes that seemed alive, whispers echoing with voices long gone. Lyra's heart raced, but she did not falter. Kale guided her through the danger, his hand firm around hers, his presence a constant anchor. "You must use your mind, not just your strength," Kale instructed. "The shadows test more than your body, they test your spirit." Lyra concentrated, sensing the flow of energy around her, the rhythm of the wind, the pulse of the earth beneath her feet. Slowly, cautiously, she moved through the valley, each step precise, each breath measured. The shadows lunged and recoiled, testing her determination. And then in the heart of the valley they were separated. Shadows surged around Lyra, cutting her off from Kale. Fear threatened to overtake her, but she remembered his words: courage, patience, heart. Trust him and trust yourself. She stepped forward, holding her ground as the shadows closed in. Then a familiar presence surged into her awareness: Kale. His voice echoed in her mind. "Do not falter, Lyra, I am with you." Drawing strength from him, she pressed onward, breaking through the darkness. When the shadows finally parted, she found Kale waiting, his cloak torn, his hair damp with sweat, but his eyes fierce and unwavering. "You are stronger than I believed," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "And yet we are not done. The valley will test us again and again. But together we will endure." Lyra smiled faintly, exhausted but unbroken. "Then we endure together." Kale's gaze lingered on her, a storm and fire mixed in his dark eyes. "Together," he echoed. As dawn broke over the mountains, the valley lay silent, as if nothing had happened. Yet both Kale and Lyra knew the truth. The valley had revealed more than danger. It had revealed the depth of their connection, the strength of their bond, and the promise of challenges yet to come. Lyra had learned something vital. Survival was more than strength. It was trust, courage, patience, and the ability to face the unknown alongside someone who would not let you fall. And Kale had discovered that even an alpha king, feared by all, could find something worth protecting beyond power and command, a heart that smiled even in the shadow of death. But even as they left the valley behind, a new unease lingered. Whispers of darker forces beyond the mountains reached them, and Lyra knew that the ultimate test was still ahead, a test that could either unite them forever or tear them apart. For now, though, the fire of their bond burned brightly, a small but unyielding light in the frozen wilderness. And as they continued their journey, neither spoke of the dangers yet to come, but both knew they would face them together, come what may. The air was heavy with anticipation as Kale and Lyra approached the ruins of the ancient palace. Broken marble columns jutted from the ground like bones, and the walls, cracked and weathered, carried the whispers of centuries past. A cold wind swept through the halls, carrying a faint hum, a magic older than either of them could name. "This place," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "It feels alive, like it's watching us." Kale nodded, his dark eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. "It is alive," he said, voice low, "and it remembers. Every betrayal, every act of courage, every heart broken here, it lingers." Lyra shivered but did not let fear show on her face. She had faced death, storms, shadows, and mountains and survived. She could face this place too. With Kale beside her, she felt the courage she had learned in the wilderness flow through her. They entered the main hall. The moonlight streaming through shattered windows painted long, silver beams across the broken floor. Shadows moved unnaturally along the walls, as if the palace itself breathed. Lyra tightened her grip on the staff Kale had given her, the weapon that had saved her more than once. Kale stopped in the center of the hall, his eyes meeting hers. "This is the heart of the curse," he said, "the place where power was stolen, where greed and betrayal thrived. If we are to survive, we must face it together. There is no turning back now." Lyra nodded. "I am ready." The first shadow rose suddenly from the broken marble floor. It was not solid, not entirely of this world. Dark, twisting shapes, eyes glowing like embers, swept toward them. Lyra felt the old fear rise, but she pushed it aside. Kale's hand found hers, grounding her, steadying her. "You trust me," he said. "Yes," Lyra replied, voice firm. "Then trust yourself too," he added. "This curse feeds on doubt. If you falter, it will consume us both." Together they moved. Lyra struck with her staff, each blow dispelling a shadow, while Kale's movements were like water and steel combined. They fought as one, synchronized, unyielding, connected in a way that went beyond words. Yet the curse was cunning. Shadows reformed, shifting into the shapes of people from their pasts. Lyra saw the faces of her lost pack, the hunters who had dragged her away, even a fleeting image of her own fear-stricken reflection. The illusions were meant to break her spirit, to make her doubt her strength and her connection to Kale. "You are not real," she shouted, swinging her staff in wide arcs. "I am alive. I am stronger than you." Kale's voice cut through the illusions, firm and unwavering. "Do not let them touch your heart, Lyra. Focus. We are stronger together." The illusions faltered at the force of their bond, wavering, then dissolving into mist. Lyra's heart pounded, but she stood taller, eyes blazing. For the first time, she felt the true depth of her power, the courage, the determination, the unwavering heart that could stand against even magic as old as the world. The final test awaited them in the throne room, a cavernous space at the palace's center. The throne itself was cracked and blackened, its power twisted by centuries of greed and rage. A pulse of energy radiated from it, cold and sharp, filling the room with tension. Kale stepped forward first, his dark eyes reflecting the pale moonlight. "This is where the curse begins," he said, "and this is where it ends." Lyra followed, stepping carefully over broken stones. Her hands trembled slightly, but the fear was tempered by the trust she had built, trust in Kale and trust in herself. From the throne, a figure emerged, not fully human, not fully shadow. Its voice echoed in the hall, a hiss of malice. "You are weak," it said. "Fools, thinking you can undo centuries of power. You will fall. All will fall." Kale stepped forward, his aura radiating strength. "We do not fall," he said. "We fight, and together we endure." Lyra raised her staff, her voice strong. "You will not win. You do not know the strength of heart or courage or love. We will survive." The figure shrieked, attacking with tendrils of dark energy. Kale met it head-on, his fists and presence holding the force at bay. Lyra struck as well, each swing of her staff cutting through the shadows, breaking the curse's hold on the palace. The battle was long, exhausting, and terrifying. The curse tried to reach into their minds, preying on doubts, regrets, and fears. Lyra saw visions of death, of Kale being taken from her, of herself failing. But she drew strength from the bond they had forged. Every touch, every glance, every shared moment of trust became a weapon. Kale, too, drew strength from her courage. For all his power, he had not expected to find someone like Lyra, someone who could stand beside him not in fear, but in defiance. Her presence gave him clarity, focus, and the determination to fight not just for himself, but for both of them. As the final tendrils of shadow lunged at them, Lyra stepped forward, planting her staff firmly in the ground. She closed her eyes, feeling the pulse of the palace beneath her feet. Energy flowed into her, sharp and bright, and she released it in a wave that shattered the remaining darkness. The shadows screamed, twisting and writhing, before finally dissolving into nothingness. The palace fell silent. The air, once thick with menace, became calm, almost gentle. Moonlight poured through the broken windows, illuminating the ruins in a soft silver glow. Kale dropped to one knee, exhausted but alive. Lyra fell beside him, her own breaths ragged. They looked at each other, faces streaked with sweat, dirt, and snow, but eyes shining with triumph. "You did it," Kale said, his voice low and full of awe. "We did it." Lyra smiled, faint and tired, yet radiant. "We did it together." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. For a long moment neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. Every glance, every touch, every breath carried meaning. "You were incredible," Kale said finally. "Stronger than I believed. Braver than I have seen in many lifetimes." "And you," Lyra replied, voice soft, "were my anchor. Without you, I could not have faced this." Kale's eyes darkened with emotion, a mix of pride, relief, and something deeper, something neither of them had fully named until now. "Lyra," he said, stepping closer, "you are mine, not because of fate or prophecy or power, but because I cannot imagine surviving this world without you by my side." Lyra's heart fluttered. She had never felt so seen, so valued, so understood. "And you are mine," she whispered, "not by command, but because I choose you, always." The storm outside had passed, leaving the ruins bathed in serene moonlight. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was peace, a fragile, beautiful calm. They rose together, moving through the palace one last time. Shadows no longer lingered, and the energy that had once pulsed with danger was now quiet, subdued. Lyra could feel the weight of history lifting, replaced by a sense of renewal. The curse was broken, the palace no longer a prison of fear. Kale led her to the highest tower where they could see the mountains and valleys beyond. The wind was soft now, carrying the scent of pine and snow. "We survived," Lyra said, leaning against the cold stone wall. "We endured everything together." Kale's hand found hers again and he squeezed it gently. "Yes," he said, "and we will continue to endure. Whatever comes next, we face it as one." They stood in silence, looking out at the vast world beyond the ruins. Neither knew what the future held: more challenges, more battles, more shadows. But they understood something vital. They had found each other, and that bond could withstand anything. For Lyra, the journey had begun with being dragged to the brink of death. For Kale, the journey had begun with a kingdom weighed down by fear and duty. And now, at the end of their trials, they had discovered something more powerful than any curse, stronger than any army: the courage to face the world together, hearts intertwined, and the promise of love that could survive even the darkest night. As the first light of dawn touched the mountains, Kale turned to Lyra. "We have won," he said softly, "but more importantly, we have begun a new life together." Lyra smiled, finally free of fear, finally at peace. "Together," she echoed. And in that moment, the ruins of the palace were no longer a place of shadows, but a monument to endurance, courage, and the fire of hearts that refused to be broken. Even as the wind whispered through the towers, carrying the echoes of the past, Kale and Lyra knew one truth. They were no longer defined by the darkness behind them, but by the light they had found in each other. The world awaited them, vast, dangerous, and unknown. But for the first time, they would face it not as predator and prey, alpha and follower, survivor and protector, but as equals, mates, and hearts bound forever.